Jax's revenge domain.
The CEO's wife just told security to remove me from the VIP table. What she didn't know was that I controlled the $3.2 billion her company needed to survive. I'm Isaac Lawson, 49 years old, and I've been in enough tight spots to know when a situation is about to cost someone everything. This was definitely one of those moments. Let me back up and tell you how I ended up in this mess at what was supposed to be a routine military appreciation gala in Washington, D.C. I was sitting at table 12 in the VIP section of the Willard Hotel, checking my phone while waiting for the evening presentations to start. The invitation said distinguished service investors should sit at the reserved tables near the stage. As Senior Investment Director for Blackstone Capital Partners Defense Division, I qualified twice over. 12 years on submarines, then 15 years managing Pentagon contracts worth more than most small countries make in a decade. I have this habit of adjusting my Navy ring when I'm thinking things through tonight. I was thinking about one thing: finalizing the $3.2 billion funding commitment for Sentinel defense systems. Pretty straightforward deal, minimal complications, standard business. The ballroom was filling up with the usual DC crowd, defense contractors, Pentagon folks, a few Congress members working the room. I knew most of these people from other events, the kind of gathering where your handshake still means something and people remember if you keep your word. I was looking over the final contract details on my tablet when these two women walked up to my table. The blonde looked like she'd stepped out of a magazine. Designer everything, perfect makeup, the whole 9 yards. The brunette with her had that hungry look people get when they're trying to network above their level. "Excuse me," the blonde said, barely glancing at me. "I think you're sitting in the wrong seat." I looked up from my screen. Isaac Lawson, Blackstone Capital. Table 12, seat C. I showed her my place card with my name printed right there. "This is where I'm supposed to be." She crossed her arms and gave me this look like I was some kind of pest. "This table is for owners and major investors, not—" She paused, looking me up and down like she was trying to figure out what was wrong with this picture. "Not middle management types." The brunette stepped closer. "Victoria's absolutely right. These tables are reserved for people who actually matter in the defense industry. Maybe you'd be more comfortable at one of the regular tables." I touched my ring again. These were clearly civilian contractors with too much confidence and not enough sense. "Ma'am, I think there might be some confusion here." Victoria, that was apparently the blonde's name, shook her head. "No confusion at all. Howard and I are transforming this industry with fresh thinking. We need these seats for relevant people, not old-school military types who can't keep up with innovation. Old-school military types." That phrase just hung there in the air like a bad smell. I noticed people at the nearby tables were starting to listen in. Conversations were getting quieter around us. "Victoria, what seems to be the problem here?" This guy in an expensive suit walked over to our table. Mid-40s, silver hair, walking with the kind of confidence that says he's used to people saying yes to whatever he wants. He looked at me like I was a maintenance issue that needed fixing. "Howard, this gentleman seems confused about the seating arrangements," Victoria said. "I was just explaining that these tables are for serious defense industry leaders." Howard Westfield, CEO of Sentinel Defense Systems. The same company I was about to hand $3.2 billion to. He stuck out his hand with this practiced smile. "Howard Westfield, and you are Isaac Lawson." His smile flickered a little. "Lawson, that name rings a bell." "It should," I said. "Blackstone Capital Partners." Victoria actually laughed. "See? Middle management." "Howard, can you please have security help this gentleman find a more appropriate seat?" The irony wasn't lost on me. This woman was asking her husband to throw out the guy who controlled their company's entire financial future, but she had no clue about that yet. Howard's face changed a little. You could see him trying to put the pieces together, but his wife was already waving at the security guys stationed around the room. "Sir," I said, keeping my voice level, "you might want to think twice about this." "Are you threatening us?" The brunette, Amanda, I heard someone call her, jumped in. "Howard, this is exactly the kind of toxic behavior we're trying to eliminate from defense contracting." One of the security guards was walking toward us now. Everyone around us had stopped talking completely. I could see people pulling out their phones, little red recording lights starting to blink. Over in the corner, I noticed the event's livestream cameras had swiveled in our direction. "Sir," the security guard said politely, "I need you to come with me." I stayed right where I was. I'm sitting where I'm supposed to sit. "These folks are saying there's been some kind of mix-up with the seating," the guard said. He wasn't being a jerk about it, just doing his job. I could respect that. Victoria moved closer. "Look, we're not trying to be mean, but this industry needs fresh leadership, not outdated military thinking. The old boys network had its time, but that time is over." That's when the security guard put his hand on my shoulder. "Take your hands off him, now." The voice came from behind us and it wasn't loud, but it cut through all the chatter and made everyone turn around. General Pete Rogers was walking through the crowd like he was on a mission. Pentagon military liaison, been around the block more times than most of us. Behind him was Sarah Mitchell from Defense Legal, and she had that look lawyers get when they see a lawsuit walking toward them in high heels. The security guard dropped his hand like he'd touched something hot. Victoria looked confused. Howard went pale as more pieces started clicking into place. General Rogers stopped right beside our table. "Ms. Westfield, I think you're making a serious mistake here." "General, this is just a small seating mix-up," Howard said quickly, trying to smooth things over. "Nothing we can't work out." "Nothing small about this," General Rogers said. He gestured toward me. "Meet Isaac Lawson, Senior Investment Director for Blackstone Capital's Defense Division." I could hear someone at the next table whisper, "Wait, Blackstone Capital?" General Rogers wasn't done. "He's the final approval authority for Sentinel Defense Systems funding commitment." The area around table 12 went dead quiet. The orchestra was still playing somewhere across the ballroom, but it felt like someone had sucked all the air out of our little corner. I adjusted my ring and looked straight at Victoria. "What you call old-school military thinking is what keeps this country safe. And disrespecting veterans at a military appreciation event. I let that hang there for a second. That's just poor judgment." Howard's face went from pale to white. "Isaac, there's obviously been a misunderstanding here." "The only misunderstanding," I said, "was your wife thinking respect is optional when she assumes someone doesn't matter." Amanda, who'd been quiet since General Rogers showed up, finally spoke. "We didn't know you were." "What important?" I stood up slowly. "That's exactly the problem. Respect shouldn't depend on knowing someone's clearance level." Sarah Mitchell stepped forward. The incident was live-streamed. Multiple people recorded it. Howard looked around at all the cameras mounted on the walls, then at the phone still recording from every direction. You could see him starting to understand just how bad this was about to get. "The investment agreement between Sentinel Defense and Blackstone Capital has what we call a service respect provision," I continued. "Know what that is?" Sarah nodded.
Section 14.
"Any documented conduct by leadership that shows material disrespect for military service members during negotiations gives the fund the right to terminate the contract immediately." Victoria finally seemed to get that this had moved way past social embarrassment into legal trouble territory. "But we were just You were trying to remove a Navy veteran from his assigned seat because you thought he wasn't important enough to sit with you," General Rogers said, "at a military appreciation event, on camera." The weight of what just happened settled over that table like fog rolling in off the water. Howard looked at me like a man watching his life's work disappear. "Isaac, surely we can discuss this privately." "The discussion ended when your wife decided a submarine veteran didn't deserve basic respect," I said. "Some things aren't up for negotiation." So about 20 minutes later, we're sitting in the hotel's conference room. Howard, Sarah Mitchell, General Rogers, and a couple other Sentinel board members who got called away from their dinner. Victoria and Amanda didn't get invited to this meeting. The room felt smaller than it was. Howard sat across from me, looking like someone trying to figure out how many lifeboats were left on a sinking ship. "Isaac," he started, "tonight was a mistake." Victoria didn't understand the situation. The situation was a veteran sitting where he was supposed to sit. Your wife's lack of understanding was thinking she could decide who belongs and who doesn't. Sarah opened her laptop. The service respect provision is pretty specific. Any conduct by company leadership that demonstrates material disrespect for military service members, when it's documented, provides grounds for immediate contract termination. One of the board guys leaned forward. "When you say company leadership, does that include spouses, major shareholders?" Sarah confirmed, which Victoria is through her stake in the company. General Rogers was checking something on his phone. "The stream footage is already making rounds through Pentagon networks. This isn't staying quiet." I touched my ring again. 27 years ago, I took an oath to support and defend the Constitution. That oath doesn't have an expiration date. When someone treats any veteran like their service doesn't matter. I looked around the table. That's when contracts become secondary to principles. Howard tried one more angle. "If there's anything we can do to address this," it addressed itself, I said. "Your wife's words, your company's response, recorded evidence. Pretty clear-cut situation." Sarah closed her laptop. "I have to advise my client that proceeding with contract discussions under these circumstances would be inadvisable." After the meeting, I walked over to the lobby windows. You could see Pennsylvania Avenue down below, late-night traffic moving through the city like supply lines, keeping everything running. My phone call was short. Admiral James Knox picked up on the second ring. "Isaac heard there was an incident." "Yes, sir. Sentinel Defense leadership demonstrated material disrespect for military service. Multiple cameras got it all. Your recommendation, terminate funding commitment." "Effective immediately." "Agreed. I'll notify the board." That was it. No big speeches, no drama. just business decisions based on documented behavior and what the contract says. While I was making that call, emergency board meetings were getting set up in conference rooms all over DC. Sentinel Defense's leadership was about to learn what happens when military standards meet corporate reality. By 8 a.m. the next morning, Sentinel Defense Systems got their wake-up call. Formal notification that their $3.2 billion funding commitment had been terminated. The Defense Department also quietly started reviewing their existing contracts for potential conduct violations. Howard's assistant called me 3 times before lunch. I didn't pick up. The industry news picked up the story by noon. Major defense contractor loses billion-dollar funding amid conduct concerns. The articles mentioned governance issues and leadership problems, but they didn't get into the specifics. None of them mentioned Victoria's comments about old-school military types or having security remove a veteran from his seat. But in Pentagon hallways and defense contractor boardrooms, the real story was spreading through networks that don't show up in press releases. Word travels fast when it involves respect for people who served. 3 days later, I'm back in my office going through new contract proposals when Sarah Mitchell called. Isaac, thought you should know, Sentinel's board voted Howard out as CEO. They're saying it's unrelated to what happened at the Gala. But boards don't usually fire CEOs 3 days after losing $3.2 billion in funding. I finished. Exactly. Victoria's being asked to sell her shares too. I looked out my office window at the Potomac, where you can sometimes see Navy ships moving through the water with that same quiet authority that ended a billion-dollar deal. Any word on the contract? Dead in the water? Other investors are pulling out. The company's looking at bankruptcy within 6 months. That evening, I drove over to Arlington National Cemetery. Not for any official business, just to walk among the headstones and think about why some things matter more than money. Every marker there represents someone who understood that respect isn't earned through job titles or bank accounts. It's earned through service, doing what's right, and treating people with basic human dignity. Victoria Westfield never learned that lesson. Her husband's company paid the price for her education. People ask me if I regret what happened that night. If I think destroying a company was too harsh for what was basically bad manners at a party, here's what they don't get. It wasn't about hurt feelings or social embarrassment. It was about what that moment revealed when someone thought nobody important was watching. In the military, we say character is what you do when you think nobody's looking. But in the business world, somebody's always looking. Cameras are recording, contracts have consequences, and decisions matter. Real power doesn't announce itself with designer clothes or condescending remarks. It sits quietly at the assigned table wearing a service ring and waits to see how people choose to act. Victoria thought she was clearing out some nobody who didn't belong at her level. What she actually did was show why her husband's company wasn't qualified to handle contracts that defend this country. The defense industry learned something that night: veterans don't stop being important when they hang up the uniform. Service members transition to civilian careers, but the values that made them effective in the military don't get left behind. Companies that understand this build solid partnerships with the Pentagon. Companies that don't last long enough for it to matter. A week after the Gala, I got a call from a different defense contractor. They'd heard what happened and wanted to discuss a potential partnership, not because they felt sorry for me, but because they respected what the whole situation represented. We need people who understand that integrity isn't negotiable. The CEO told me, "What you did sent a message that our industry needed to hear." That new partnership ended up being worth $4.8 billion over 3 years. Funny how things work out when you deal with people who get it. These days, I still go to military appreciation events. I still sit at whatever table they assign me. And I still wear my Navy ring as a reminder that some commitments don't have expiration dates. The respect I learned to give and expect during my submarine days serves me well in conference rooms and contract negotiations. It served this country for over 2 centuries. What happened to Sentinel Defense serves as a reminder to others in America. We honor those who served. When we don't, there are consequences. Victoria learned that lesson cost $3.2 billion. Howard learned it cost him his career. Their employees learned it when they had to find new jobs. Sometimes the most expensive education is the one that teaches you respect. Isn't optional, it's the foundation everything else gets built on. The funny thing is, if Victoria had just said hello and maybe thanked me for my service, we'd probably still be doing business with Sentinel Defense today. Instead, she decided to judge a book by its cover and remove what she saw as an obstacle to her networking agenda. That decision cost more than most people make in a lifetime. I kept my seat at table 12 that night. Victoria lost a lot more than hers. The industry remembers stories like this. They get passed around at conferences and board meetings, usually with the moral attached: treat people with respect, especially veterans. because you never know who you're talking to. But I think they miss the bigger point. You should treat everyone with respect, period. Not because they might be important, but because it's the right thing to do. The fact that I happened to control billions in defense funding was just what made the consequences visible. The problem was the disrespect itself. You want to know what really gets me about this whole thing? It's not that Victoria was rude or that Howard lost his company, it's that none of it had to happen. If she just nodded hello when she walked up to that table, maybe asked about my background, shown basic courtesy to someone at a military event, we'd probably still be partners today. Sentinel Defense would still be getting Pentagon contracts. Howard would still have his job. Their employees wouldn't be looking for work. But she made a choice. She saw someone who didn't fit her idea of what important looked like and decided that person didn't deserve respect. That choice cascaded through an entire corporation like a depth charge going off in shallow water. The irony is that Victoria thought she was protecting her husband's business interests by networking with the right people. Instead, she torpedoed the biggest deal in their company's history because she couldn't be bothered to treat a veteran with basic courtesy. I think about that sometimes when I'm reviewing new contracts or sitting in boardrooms. How many other Victorias are out there making assumptions about who matters and who doesn't? How many deals never happen because someone decides the person across the table isn't worth their time? The business world is full of people who think power comes from who you know, what you wear, or how loud you talk. But real power is quieter than that. It's having control over things that matter and using that control responsibly. I've been managing defense contracts for 15 years now. I've seen companies rise and fall based on how they treat people. The ones that last are the ones that understand respect is a business fundamental, not a social nicety. After the Sentinel situation, word got around the industry pretty fast, not just about what happened, but about why it happened. Companies started being more careful about how their leadership behaved at events, especially around veterans. Some people called it political correctness run amok. I call it basic professionalism finally catching up with bad actors. The Pentagon noticed too. They started adding conduct clauses to more contracts, making it clear that how you treat service members matters in defense contracting. It's not enough to just deliver good products. You have to demonstrate values that align with what the military stands for. A few months after the gala, I was at another industry event when this young executive came up to me. He'd heard about what happened with Sentinel and wanted to make sure he understood the lesson. So the takeaway is to always be nice to veterans, he asked. The takeaway, I told him, is to always be nice to everyone. You never know who you're talking to, and more importantly, it's just the right thing to do. He nodded like he was filing that information away for future use, but I could tell he still didn't quite get it. He was thinking tactically how to avoid stepping on the wrong toes. He wasn't thinking about character. Character is what matters in the long run. It's what people remember about you after the contracts are signed and the deals are done. It's what determines whether people want to do business with you again. Victoria had a character problem. She thought her money and social position gave her permission to treat people poorly. The market corrected that assumption in the most expensive way possible. These days, when I hear about someone getting fired or losing a big opportunity because of how they treated people, I'm not surprised. What surprises me is how many others seem shocked that actions have consequences. Maybe it's because we've created a culture where saying the right things in public is considered more important than doing the right things in private, where image management matters more than actual integrity. But cameras are everywhere now. Social media captures everything, and business moves too fast for companies to survive having leaders who don't understand basic respect. The Sentinel story became a case study in some business schools, not about defense contracting or investment decisions, but about leadership and organizational culture. About how quickly things can go wrong when the people at the top don't represent your company's values. I'm glad it's being taught that way. The next generation of business leaders needs to understand that respect isn't just morally right, it's strategically smart. Companies with cultures of respect attract better talent, build stronger partnerships, and avoid the kind of disasters that sink businesses overnight. Companies that tolerate disrespect, even from major shareholders, create liability that eventually costs more than any short-term gains. Victoria probably still doesn't understand what she did wrong. In her mind, she was just managing seating arrangements at a party. She doesn't see the connection between her behavior and the consequences that followed, but the market understood perfectly. Money flows toward competence and character. It flows away from arrogance and disrespect. That's not political. That's not social engineering. That's just business. The seat at table 12 was just furniture, but what that seat represented, inclusion, recognition, basic human dignity, that was worth everything. Look, I've shared this story because I think it matters. We live in times when people feel like they can say or do whatever they want without facing real consequences. When success is measured by how much you can get away with rather than how much value you create, But consequences still exist. They're just not always immediate or obvious. Sometimes they take the form of lost opportunities, damaged relationships, or destroyed reputations. Sometimes they cost $3.2 billion and hundreds of jobs. Have you ever witnessed someone being disrespectful to a veteran or service member in a professional setting? How did you handle it? What do you think the appropriate response should be when leadership behavior conflicts with stated company values? These aren't abstract questions. They're situations that happen every day in workplaces across America. How we respond defines not just individual character, but the culture we're building for the next generation. If this story resonated with you, if you believe that respect and integrity still matter in business, I'd appreciate you sharing your thoughts below. Your perspective helps shape these conversations and reminds others that character still counts. That table taught me that real power isn't about commanding respect. It's about earning it and giving it freely to others.